when you think about what is a government going to use if they want to create a digital pound or a digital dollar, it's going to be Ethereum, because it's just got the most support, the biggest developer network. It's the easiest to use. It's the easiest to get adoption on. Stop looking at prices and start looking at market cap. Market cap is the only metric that you should be measuring by in terms of the growth of a project, because they can release more tokens, and if they release more tokens, then it devalues everyone else's tokens.
Hi everyone, we are in again for another special treat. We have one of the greatest traders, popular investors in the world joining us once again. We have JayNemsis, Jay Smith, back in the show. Jay, it's nice to see you. It's been a while.
Yeah, it's great to see you again. It has been a while. It feels like it's been a short lifetime with how much has been going on. So yeah, it's good to catch up.
Last year when we did a video with Heloise, Bitcoin was around 20,000, somewhere around that region, and now we've seen it go to 64,000, drop back to 28, and now somewhere hover around 48, 49, 50, or around that area while we're recording this video. Coming into the last quarter of the year, what are you doing? And then two-pronged question also for people who are watching this that want to enter. For those that are coming into this for the first time, is it still early? Is it too late? What should they do?
So in terms of what I've been doing, I started the year pretty bullish on Bitcoin, and I've had exposure and on Ethereum, and I've had exposure to both of them with like a 25-75 split roughly between Bitcoin and Ethereum. So I weighted towards Ethereum, and I'm still pretty much in that weighting now. My exposure has increased a bit, so as a percentage of my portfolio, I'm sitting at around 10% exposure to cryptocurrency currently on eToro, and then obviously I have stuff outside of eToro as well. My old stash. But yeah, I'm still really optimistic. I think I said near the start of the year that I think this year we could see up to 100K on Bitcoin, and I still think that's possible even now. And we're not even half of that price currently, and I still think that it's very possible that by the end of the year that could happen, because we've seen how quickly Bitcoin can move and Ethereum can move. In terms of if you're not invested and you want to be invested, I think the safest way to do it is the dollar cost average, really. We are at a reasonably high price in Bitcoin currently. If you look at the past, it's only really been higher than this price for maybe a few weeks of Bitcoin's entire history. So you're buying an expensive price if you're buying in now, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't buy. It just means that you should be careful and plan your buying, and maybe just start to build some exposure so that if it does go and take off towards 100K, then you're not missing out entirely. And equally, if it doesn't, then it's fine. You haven't invested too much. You can still keep buying if it drops lower. I don't always recommend dollar cost averaging, actually, but I think now is really a good time to be doing that. And yeah, in terms of where they're going, I think both Bitcoin and Ethereum still have huge potential, huge upside. I think you're still relatively early, and you can still make a good amount of money. You're not going to become super wealthy overnight and driving your Lambos, but I would think that maybe you could buy a new car. Perhaps.
You mentioned about 100K, and then there's so many versions or models on how that's computed. What are you using for that? Stock to flow, the halving cycle, or you're just computing using technical analysis, the range between 28,000 and 64,000, breakout from that will bring it to?
First of all, 100K is obviously going to be a psychological level. So if we get towards it, that is going to probably form resistance, regardless of where the technical analysis would leave it. Although that does line up reasonably well as well. I think really it's about looking at the adoption stuff for it. I always like to focus on the product the most when I'm analyzing stuff, and for me, you can see certainly on Ethereum with both DeFi and NFTs, those markets are really starting to thrive and experiment and push the boundaries, and as a result, we're starting to see perhaps some of the early projects that may last a very long time, and so when you think about projects like Axie, for example, or you think about El Salvador or even companies like Tesla and MicroStrategy putting Bitcoin on their balance sheets, then you've got to kind of think about, okay, how big is that market, right? How many countries are going to have to put it on their balance sheet as a result, in their central banks, as a result of El Salvador having it as a currency? And then you've got Paraguay, Uruguay, Argentina, all kind of watching this experiment and waiting to potentially do something very similar as well. So on the Bitcoin front, I'm looking at the companies who I think are likely to add it to their balance sheet. I think if you're a company that has a lot of assets like Apple, for example, I think, the thought must be crossing their mind by now. Whether or not they're going to do it is a different story, and how big they decide to go, if they do decide to do it, is a different story. But I think most big companies with big balance sheets are starting to think about it. I think most governments are now starting to think, should we have a little bit just in case, because obviously central banks store reserve currencies for different countries around the world, right? And then on the Ethereum side of things, it's how big are the products, right? How big is DeFi going to get? How well is Ethereum 2.0 going to scale? How big are NFTs going to get? And everything around that. And you kind of measure those ecosystems and you think, in the future, how big are these industries going to be? And that's the way that I approach it, really. And then I kind of work backwards from that to get the kind of prices that I'm expecting.
People have been saying for years that Bitcoin is going to go to zero, but what's interesting about that, the adoption in El Salvador would dispel that already, because every time it drops, they're the ones they have a central bank who can actually buy lower already, and it could be added to their reserves, which will be, I think, favorable for them, buying it at a lower price. So yeah, I think where we are right now compared to last year, there's massive adoption into it, and it's very, very exciting. Now, I'm curious on this. You mentioned that you're waiting Bitcoin 25%, correct me if I'm wrong,
yeah.
And then you have 70+% for Ethereum. So does that actually mean that with that, just looking at your allocation, you think ETH's gonna flip Bitcoin already? Because a lot of people that I know who believe that have a massively larger amount of Ethereum than Bitcoin.
Yeah, I think it will be flipped. The question isn't so much if it will be flipped, I don't think. I think most people in the crypto space now believe that. Really, the question is when, and also where potentially some of the other newer Ethereum competitors end up as well. So the likes of Cardano and maybe even Polkadot and Solana. Where are those going to end up? Are those also going to flip? Are they going to flip Ethereum before Ethereum can flip Bitcoin, potentially? So, there's quite a lot to think about there. I think really for me, it just comes down to the scale of what you can build on Ethereum compared to Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin is very much falling into this kind of defensive, relatively stable, for crypto at least, asset class that is just like, tried and tested, super safe. It really is the gold of crypto, right? And that is a really big market that's, trillions and trillions of dollars. But it's not as big as all of DeFi and all of gaming and all of NFTs and art and collectibles, and potentially even stock markets and betting markets and derivatives. If you can think of it, you can probably build it on Ethereum, including, and this is the most important thing for me, including central bank digital currencies. And I think that as much as we're seeing El Salvador and some of the other, especially Latin American countries kind of moving towards Bitcoin, we are going to see a real battle unfold of central bank run digital currencies versus Bitcoin backed currencies or straight Bitcoin. And I think that's where Ethereum comes in, is that when you think about what is a government going to use if they want to create a digital pound or a digital dollar, it's going to be Ethereum, because it's just got the most support, the biggest developer network, it's the easiest to use, it's the easiest to get adoption on. And so, yeah, that's really for me the big catalyst, is that not only do we have all of the apps and all of the different DeFi and everything else that's being built, but I think we're going to start seeing governments building on top of it as well.
Bitcoin, Ethereum, DeFi, there's a lot of tokens that have been built around that, and there's so many projects from Aave, from Uniswap that are in that particular space. Is there something that interests you in that area, or you just want the layer one solution, layer one, layer two solution below it, and not the apps that are being built on top of it?
I have a few favorite actual end user apps, right? So the stuff that we end up using, like Axie Infinity. Axie Infinity isn't one of them, but I do have a few favorites. I just wanted to make sure that was clear before everyone's like, quick buy Axie Infinity. No, I think there's a few kind of end products that I really like that are built on Ethereum. For example, Brave browser and the basic attention token. They're doing extremely well. I really like the structure of their tokenomics, and if you're currently using Chrome browser, what's wrong with you? Go and download Brave and start using that. You can start earning money from using Brave, and also they're now working on a search engine as well. There's actually some pretty big competitors that are well funded in the UK that don't use crypto but are actually trying to adopt the same kind of model as Brave, which I think is confirmation that this is like something that is a really, really good product. If people are starting to copy it with good funding, then you can be pretty sure it's here to stay. There's a few others I really like. I think prediction market stuff and betting stuff is quite interesting. So I really like Augur. I think Gnosis is quite interesting as well. They're a competitor with Augur. And those are kind of under the radar at the moment, but I still see the opportunity there as being really, really big. In terms of like the layer 2 or the more kind of DeFi stuff, I think projects like Loopring and stuff like that for liquidity is really interesting. And obviously the likes of Polygon and things like that I really like as well. But if I'm honest, I think me personally, I'm in a position where on eToro I'm limited in terms of what I can invest in, and also I've been in crypto for long enough that I don't need to find those really big risky projects anymore, and I can more safely stick with things like Ethereum. And I think that's something to consider for everyone, really, is realistically, what is your risk tolerance? Because if you're going for these smaller projects and kind of betting on the kind of the newcomers, then you are taking more risk as a result. And it's whether or not that risk is worth it for you, because Ethereum has still got a lot of upside left, I think. So that's the kind of approach I take. I find there are a few projects that are kind of close to my heart that I like, but realistically, if I were to weight my holding in all of the altcoins I have and compare it with Ethereum, it's maybe not even 10% of what I hold in just Ethereum. So really, those are just like almost fun bets compared to my kind of bet on Ethereum.
Of course, there's so many views in crypto. The ones that are super into Cardano or into even Solana right now is pumping. They have different narratives also that these are the ones that could actually beat Ethereum. And the reason why I'm asking that is there's a lot of newcomers who are coming in thinking that just because the numerical the amount is lower, people want to buy that thinking that it could become 1,000 or 100 or a very, very high number in the future.
The number one thing, if you're brand new to crypto and you're looking at the prices of these things, you are doing it wrong. Stop looking at prices and start looking at market cap. Market cap is the only metric that you should be measuring by in terms of the growth of a project, because they can release more tokens, and if they release more tokens, then it devalues everyone else's tokens, right? If Bitcoin's got a limit of 21 million, and then you've got projects like EOS, for example, that's I think got 1 billion or something like that. So you can't measure the value of the individual tokens against each other, because it really depends on how many of those there are. How divisible they are is also actually in some ways going to be important in the future as well. So really just focus on market cap. That's the key thing. Market cap is the most important thing by a long way.
If you're gonna force rank the so-called Ethereum killers, what do you like more? Cardano, Polkadot, Solana?
Give a disclaimer that I actually own all three.
Okay.
But my biggest of those three is Polkadot.
Wow.
Yeah, I met Gavin Wood in 2017 in London, and he was pitching Polkadot at the time. It was actually at an Ethereum conference in London, and he was there presenting Polkadot. And I remember watching him present it and thinking, "This is the most complex thing I have ever seen." My brain was completely broken, and I understood it, but it took a I was there with like my calculator and taking notes and thinking like, how does this thing work? Has he thought about this? Has he thought about this? And like the scale of that project was just completely immense. And I still think that the scale of that project is significantly larger than most of the other stuff out there. Solana comes close as well. But I think the thing that I really, really liked about Polkadot was the way they went about developing it, when you compare it, especially with something like Cardano. So Cardano went with this approach of, we're going to release a token, we're going to give out our plan of what we want to build, and then we're going to start building it. And then they did that, and they started building it, and they're still building it. And they're getting pretty close to a fully working product now, but it's taken a long time. Whereas Polkadot went with this route of, I'm going to tell a few people in the industry, I'm not going to advertise it, I'm not going to release a token, I'm going to work on it, and then when it's finished, I'm going to release it. And that's pretty much what they did. Polkadot just arrived on CoinMarketCap. I think it was in 4th place or something when it arrived, and everyone was like, "What's this?" And I was like, this is the way to build a product, right? Like, you build the product, you release the product is done, it works, and then you continue working on it from that point. And I really just respect that way of building. I think that was a really mature approach to really make sure that you had properly planned everything out and could actually deliver on your promises, rather than making promises and then trying to deliver on them. So I think for me, that was a real big kind of booster in my confidence for Polkadot, was seeing in 2017 him pitching it to a very small group of very, very passionate people, and then hearing nothing for 3 years, and then all of a sudden it arrives, and you're like, wow, he built it, And at that point you think, wow, this guy, he talked about it to people. He didn't try and shill it. He wasn't trying to get everyone to invest. He was just talking about what he was doing. He went away, he did it, he came back, and now it's a working product. And yeah, so that's why I really like Polkadot.
Do you think there's gonna be a place that they all coexist, or quoting Cathy Wood, will it be a winner take most, or winner take will it be like Ethereum, and then one more that will have the lion's share, that everyone will won't have a big chunk of it? Or I'm actually thinking that since we're so early, that they could have their own spaces as well.
Yeah, I think this is going to be the interesting thing, right? It's going to be a real test of all of the kind of economic models that there are for capitalism and how it works. Does the free market, when it is really completely free, work? Does it remain competitive, or does someone get a big advantage and just take over the market? And I don't really know the answer to that problem. I think we're probably likely to see a handful of big players, and no more than that. So I think, maybe 3 or 4 Ethereum competitors, essentially, or smart contract platforms, a few store of value platforms, and then a few specialist platforms, and then all of the dApps. That's the way that I see it evolving. It's similar to smartphones, right? We used to have all of these different competitors. I think Samsung was making an operating system at one point, and you had Microsoft making an operating system. But at the end of the day, what we ended up with was Android and iOS. And that's pretty, and BlackBerry's still there somewhere. But that's how it ended up. And if you're not on those 2 ecosystems, then you missed out, right? And if you betted on any of those other things, you missed out. So yeah, that's why I'm so cautious with investing in a lot of the projects that are lower down. There are a few that I like, and especially from kind of even an ethical point to some extent, the stuff that's really focusing on how sustainable it is in terms of energy usage and things like that. That's a nice to have, but at the end of the day, I think there's only going to be a few winners.
I'm curious on this, and this is something that I've noticed talking to people from the West. They somehow leave the Binance Smart Chain. It's not in the conversation, but here in Asia, BSC is so popular. It's like everyone uses BSC. I want to know the rationale behind that, because it's always either Ethereum Solana, Ethereum Polkadot, or Ethereum ADA. Why is BSC left behind?
Because it's a copy, really. I think that's where you have to start, right? It's a copy. It's not really something that started by developing its own technology. It took existing technology and then it's interpreting that in its own way. I think that's the first thing. I think the second thing is that you can make a lot of arguments that it's quite centralized as well. At the end of the day, Binance are the people that are obviously mainly funding the development and working on this thing, and essentially in charge of how that chain's operating. So I think that's one of the reasons. I also think generally Binance specifically, I think, is starting to fall out of favor a lot more in the West recently. And people are actually moving back to exchanges like Kraken and things like that a bit. And I think that comes from the regulatory side of it. And especially in Europe and the US, regulators are starting to push much more on cryptocurrency exchanges. And I think, people see that risk extending to Binance Smart Chain as well, to be honest. I myself don't use Binance anymore. The FCA in the UK is pretty much declared war on Binance, and are trying to rally allies from Japan and Singapore and everywhere else to join them in this kind of hunt for Binance. And even in the US, we just saw the headlines this week about the SEC going after Coinbase for securities, which I think is probably a bit of an overreach, to be honest. But I think that's really at the forefront of people's minds now. Is in the West, is that they want to be somewhere where they really feel safe now. And I think that Binance Smart Chain and Binance itself just doesn't feel as safe as Ethereum or Polkadot or whatever, and some of the other more regulated exchanges.
Your take on NFTs, is it too hyped up right now for you? Prices have been insane, but there's still a lot of people who have not come in. I've seen a lot of people who've made a lot of money in Ethereum. They don't plan to bring it back into fiat, and the way that they're taking profits is they just keep on buying all of these NFTs.
I think there's a correction coming, but it is just the start. So I think if I were to give advice, and I'm not a financial advisor, so this technically isn't advice, but if I were to give advice, I would say just make sure that you diversify. If you're making good profits in NFTs and you're passionate about NFTs and you feel like you have good knowledge on that market, then by all means invest in it, but don't only invest in NFTs, because I've seen the collapses in these various markets over the years. I've been in crypto since 2013, and I can tell you that if you went on CoinMarketCap in 2013 and looked at the top 10 cryptocurrencies, the only ones that are still there are Bitcoin and Dogecoin. And Dogecoin I don't think is going to be there much longer. So that seems like you're just it was an immature market back then, but you've got to remember how new NFTs really are. The CryptoKitties was the first time we saw it in 2017. That was the first real big NFT project, and then it was pretty quiet through 2018, 2019, and only in the last year and a half or so have we really started to see NFTs come to the forefront. So it's still an incredibly new market, and you've got to think, what really is the value behind this? Is the ecosystem sustainable? Is the ecosystem going to grow? Are there too many of these products on the market? Am I going to be able to sell it when I want to sell it? Or am I just hoping that there's someone who's going to buy it for a higher price than me? So yeah, I like to think of it as, if you're doing it with things like art, at least pick something that you actually like, so that maybe if it goes down in price, you can still enjoy that you've helped fund this piece of art. But generally, just think about the ecosystem and think about, long term, are other people actually going to still desire this project in 3 years' time?
Are you buying an Ethereum rock?
I have looked at the Ethereum rocks. I mean, this is the most hilarious thing, right? Have you seen the invisible one, by the way?
Oh, no.
Someone made an invisible Ethereum rock, which is just a white. There's nothing. It's just a white page, and I think that's worth like 3 or 4 Ethereum now. Yeah, $20,000 piece of white paper, I guess, essentially. Yeah, I mean, this is the funny thing about the NFT space, right? Is that essentially it's kind of about the memes. And if you get a joke, and if enough other people also get a joke and appreciate that joke, essentially that joke's like art. I mean, if you think about like the traditional memes that you see on the internet, right, of like the guy looking over his shoulder with his girlfriend holding his hand looking at something else that people write different things on, or you think about like the socially awkward penguin meme, things like that, you know, those were created in like 2010, 2013 kind of time, and they're still with us in culture, right? People still use those to communicate. And the same with like GIFs on Twitter and stuff, you know, the head palm kind of GIF and things like that. So you can invest in stupid things like Ethereum rocks, and there is a reasonable chance that it might actually hold its value quite well because it's seen as this joke that's just going to, you know, last a long time. So, you know, if you want to invest in that stuff, I'm not going to tell you not to. It's funny, and you know, if enough people think it's funny, then it's going to have value. There's still other opportunities elsewhere in crypto outside of, you know, the big names like Bitcoin and Ethereum, especially in the DApp space. I think the DApp space is not even remotely mature yet, and there's going to be some, you know, we're still going to have essentially companies like Google built on top of cryptocurrencies, and those companies are out there to be found by people. So if you want to take big risks, that's the way you can go. But Bitcoin is still a great investment for people that want crypto exposure but want to be a bit safer.